Welcome to Inspiring Insurance. Our goal is to provide value to the insurance industry through real-life experiences from insurance professionals who have walked the walk. You can expect to hear story sharing, top tips, and practical advice to help you grow and succeed in your career. We hope you enjoy this episode's guest. Our next guest is a talented and seasoned professional with 15 years in the insurance industry and 15 years in recruitment. Joining me from Brisbane is Brendon Smallsman.
Good morning, Brendon. Thank you for joining me this morning. Really excited to have a chat with you today. You've got an outstanding career, all things insurance, but also coming from the world of recruitment. So I think this is going to be a really, really interesting chat. Hopefully provide some value to the audience in the insurance industry. So thanks for coming on board.
Thanks, Nathan. It's good to be here.
Thanks, Brendon. All right, mate. I'd love you to kick us off. Can you give us a bit of an overview of your career? I'd love to know all about your initial insurance career, moving into recruitment, back into broking, business owner. Give us a bit of a run, mate.
Right. Okay. It's a long one, so I'll try and condense it as much as possible for you. I fell into recruitment like pretty much everyone else. I was pretty young. I was only sort of 16 and a half at the time. School dropout. Managed to get a job through a temp agency in an insurance business, and found I guess just the culture, just everyone sort of enjoyed each other's company. There's a lot to learn. There was a lot of social aspect, all that sort of thing, and sort of built my way up through data entry, telesales, customer service, underwriting. So I moved on to a small brokerage called Delaney Kelly Golding. There was back in the day when Steadfast was small and starting out as well. So Bob Kelly was just sort of kicking that off. It was like 5 different broking firms were a part of that, and I was in his family's business, DKG, and moved on from that after a while into a sort of a startup underwriting agency business, which I sort of worked with for about 5 years. They went from 0 to 20 mil GWP in the space of 12 months, which is insanely fast. Built all their systems for them, basically did all of the back office and middle office stuff for them so that their sales team could go out and generate business. But I got a bit bored after 5 years of that. I'm always sort of doing things that I like businesses when things are sort of changing and evolving a lot. And I actually was looking to get back into broking, but during that time, financial services reform had been through. I hadn't obtained my tier 1 because I didn't need to. I was working in an underwriting agency and sort of back office. And one of the recruiters I spoke to said, you seem like a pretty personable guy. You obviously love insurance, but you can talk. Have you ever thought about recruitment? And to be honest, I hadn't. But he was at the time in the process of selling his business. I didn't know that, but he was also looking to transition into working on the business, and he was looking after some major accounts like Aon Marsh, JLT, Liberty, Vero, etc. And I just thought, why not? I'll give this a crack. And so I kind of jumped into it. A bit of a leap of faith. Took to it very well, and then spent the next 15 years doing it. So it's interesting, the person I was working for, as he was selling his business, and he'd sort of said to the whole crew in the business, they were a financial services, banking and insurance recruiter, about 30 odd people, and he often say, I reckon about 75% of you are going to go out and start your own businesses. He was probably right on that. My next move was basically to start my own business. I went and joined another recruitment firm, recruiting, accounting, and finance, for just long enough to get through my non-compete. Yep. And then I jumped in and started my own insurance recruitment business.
Amazing.
Which I then spent, the next, 10 odd years doing. So I was, recruiting, senior brokers, senior underwriters, claims specialists, liability and financial lines, construction claim specialists, that sort of thing. So I've always been in and around, the general insurance space. I got to, we moved up to Queensland in 2015, and, I wasn't really sort of, traveling back and forth to Sydney, which was my main sort of hunting ground from a recruitment perspective, as much. And I kind of decided, do I want to be a self-employed, recruiter for the rest of my career? I've always loved insurance, and that's kind of, I guess, what made me good as an insurance recruiter is I did love talking product and talking about the market with underwriters and brokers. And so I thought, how do I get myself back into broking? I saw a local broker in 22 had advertised for an account manager. And I just thought I'll give him a call and pitch myself in. Basically, I said to him, look, I can see you're looking for an account manager. You're looking for a certain skill set. I know this game well enough. I've been recruiting it long enough. And you could be looking for another 6 months, and you might get what you're looking for, but you may not get the best account manager out there. You're a small local broking firm. It's candidates have got their pick of the market at the moment. Back then, if you can remember what that was like. So get me on board. I'll get my tier one, as quick as can possibly be done, and in that time, I'll still make myself useful. And he took a punt on me, and I then jumped in, learnt the systems. It's a funny thing, as a recruiter, I'd often hear clients say, oh, they need to have insight, they need to have wind beat, they need to know this. I learned insight in a week. Yeah. It's the systems that insurers use now are so intuitive that if as a hiring manager you're locked on, they must know a system. You're not seeing the wood for the trees, honestly. So anyway, look, I picked that up. It was just post Feb 22 floods. So yeah, I made myself useful. The first thing I did was I grabbed hold of the claims, went through them. Spent so much time just trying to get them resolved as quickly as possible. And you learn a lot about clients, you learn a lot about products just by doing that. So yeah, look, as fast as I could, I obtained my tier one. As soon as that happened, I was given a portfolio, and that just grew and grew and grew. And yeah, got to a point after about 2.5 years with that business. Look, I'd been self-employed before, so it was always going to probably be the case I was going to be self-employed again, because I guess the value of what you bring to the table, right? So come the end of 2024, I put in my resignation, had the plan in mind, started Centric Insurance Broking. Here I am.
Here we are. Amazing. Oh, that's awesome, mate. I think that's such a cool story. Like, you've obviously started in the industry, gone out of the industry, but recruiting for the insurance industry, and then said, you know what, I want to go back into doing what I love, which is the broking side of things. And here you are running your own business again. And you and I are very similar. 4 months into doing our own thing again, and it's been a grind, as I'm sure you can appreciate.
Oh, it is. Look, you're not going to sit there and business is going to roll in. You've got to make yourself busier than you ever have before. Got to get out and shake a lot of trees. But busyness generates busyness. So if you want to sort of if you want to build a business, you have to be out there talking to a lot of people, and before you know it, you'll be busier than you ever wanted to be. That's a good thing, though.
Yeah, love it. What sort of advice would you give to anyone who might be in your shoes, say 6 months ago, thinking about going out and starting their own or becoming an AR or their own broking firm? What would your biggest tip to those sort of candidates be?
I think if you're self-motivated, if you're somebody that is already out there generating new business, or is already confident in dealing with clients from go to woe, back yourself. I think procrastination and self-doubt probably are the main stoppers to most people kicking off their own business, when the reality is you're already doing it, but you're doing it for someone else.
Exactly. Yeah, completely agree with you. I think the biggest thing is backing yourself. And if you've already got that proven track record of being able to do it for someone else, why not go out and do it for your own? So completely agree.
Yeah. And I think, this whole, work from home and all of that sort of thing has made a lot of us be a lot more self-reliant anyway. Yeah. So the fact is, if you're already kind of, yes, you might have colleagues and you might have an office and all that sort of thing, but you probably solve a lot of your own problems now. If you already solve your own problems, well, back yourself.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Can you talk me through, so because I know that you've had obviously the 15 years in the recruitment game, and I know that new business development is a really, really key skill in being a recruiter. From those skills, what have you taken away into your broking career now, which you think could add some value to people on their new business journey?
Oh, I don't want to give away trade secrets that might give me a competitive advantage, mate. No. Look, in all honesty, there's a lot of things that I take from recruitment that I think are useful across broking as well. That for the primary one, as a recruiter, you've got a hunter mentality, right? If you're not generating new business, then the pipeline dries up and you stop getting paid. So you don't just ask for business once. You quite often you have to follow up. You have to chase and chase and chase until it's across the line. It's no different in insurance broking. I know there are a lot of brokers out there that just send a quote and they say my job's done. Client will call me back. Well, they don't call me back.
Yeah.
I'm self-employed. I can't rely on that. I send a quote and I follow up. I quite often will actually phone them when I've sent the quote, talk them through it.
Yes.
If I haven't heard back after a week, I'll phone them again. I chuck notes in the diary constantly. Follow up, follow up, follow up. I chase everything until I know the outcome. Either I've got it or I haven't got it. That's a simple one. The other thing is a recruiter, and I say this a bit, ex-recruiter, you've got an eagle-eyed view of the market, right? My job was to know everyone and every business. They didn't all have to know me, but I had to know who they were, or as well as I could. So, you'd have to know all of the various underwriting agencies. You'd have to understand, what do they write? Are they writing property? Where are they write? What type of property? Are they writing thin lines? What's their appetite? That sort of thing. So you'd know, where to pull someone out of to place them into that business. So having that view has certainly been advantageous to me, I suppose, because it means that I don't just, rely on those couple of markets that are obvious. I'm always thinking about who else is out there.
Yeah.
I think one thing in broking, if you think you know a particular risk and you know a particular underwriter and their appetite, and you carry that forward to every single transaction that comes in the door, you're going to get beaten sooner or later because the market's always evolving. It's always changing. Appetite's always changing. New entrants always come in. All of that sort of thing. You have to be looking at every opportunity and maximizing where you go to for those. That doesn't mean going out to markets that are completely unsuitable and wasting their time, but you have to keep your eyes open all the time. So I think that's something too that I bring from recruitment. You're not just trying to place someone with one company. Sometimes you're trying to think, how else can I get this person out there, or how can I best represent this person? Because from a recruitment perspective, if you come to me and say, I want to go and work at XYZ insurance brokers, I'm thinking about what other brokers out there are like that, culturally, size, client base, whatever it might be, so that they fit you as a candidate, your appetite. And that way I can make sure that I'm getting you in front of them as well, so that my competitors don't do it.
Yes, exactly. It's a little bit that outside the box thinking approach for sure. Matching.
Yeah, it's about closing the opportunity entirely, right? You're there to own 100% of the opportunity, not just think about it myopically, right? So yeah.
Yeah, love it. And so you mentioned there always staying up to date on market knowledge and trends and being able to, I guess, be ahead of the game. From a broking perspective, how do you make that happen? How do you stay ahead of it?
Oh, well, I guess you've got to, attend trade shows and all that sort of thing, talk to lots of underwriters, but there's tons of news out there all the time. So don't ignore it and flick it, read it, spend the extra time. So I'm it's just as much a part of my job to absorb every bit of insurance news that comes through, whether that comes through, through the various publications, whether it comes through, I don't know, LinkedIn updates and things like that, whether it's just searching websites and having a read through, reading through their appetite sheets, constantly, doing that basically as much as you can.
Sure. Yeah, great. And so you mentioned a word just then, the word LinkedIn, and you and I have had an off out of this meeting conversation around excuse me, personal branding before. So why do you think personal branding is now so important for people in a broking role?
Personal branding in a broking role, I think it's that is a really good question. I think it comes down to a couple of things. One, if you want to become a particular market segment specialist, personal branding's absolutely bloody important, because you've got to build a brand around your knowledge of that particular market segment. You've got to be the person that companies and would prospective customers in that market think about. And why do they think about you? Maybe they think about something that you posted on LinkedIn. Maybe it was a bit of information. Maybe it was just something that was more personalized. You saw something that they posted and you commented, right? It's all that sort of stuff. That's absolutely important. I think. I think also from a candidate perspective, branding on LinkedIn, be visible, right? So the reliance on Seek or proactive sort of recruitment processes like advertise job boards, all that sort of thing, is only going to give you a small percentage of the opportunities out there, right? They're going to be the ones that are active now, and we're seeking someone now, and et cetera, et cetera. If you've got a brand out there, then you're going to have prospective employers or recruiters tap you on the shoulder and present opportunities to you. And that's not a bad thing, because you can always say no. But if they don't do that, if they don't see you and they don't reach out to you, you never know about those opportunities. And they may be a hell of a lot better than what you're doing at the moment. So, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it does. Thank you. What did you used to look for when you were recruiting for the insurance market? What did a good candidate look like to you? What did you look for?
Oh, first and foremost was always personality and communication, right? Yep. I put them here and everything else here. Obviously, you've got to take the obvious parts. Yes, clients looking for a property underwriter. Yes, they've got to be a property underwriter. Okay, but before you differentiate all the other stuff, how do they present? How do they communicate? How do they engage? They're the important bits. Because they're going to be success factors for them, going forward, in terms of how they, build relationships internally and externally. And insurance is a forward-facing, market, right? It's a client-facing market. So that was the important part. The other things I'd look for, I would certainly look for things like who are they connected with, who do they know, what type of clients they've had experience with or exposure with, how well do they articulate their job, right? That's a really important. That obviously goes back to the communication part, but you should be able to tell me as a complete layman what you do and make it make sense, right? Don't talk about slips and things like that, or whatever. Drop a whole lot of technical jargon on me, explain the processes that you do, but do it succinctly.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, I love it. Thank you, mate. Oh, that's really, really good. And I think there's so many synergies between the two different industries, recruitment and insurance broking, that the skills are so transferable. So thanks so much for sharing all of that. What advice would you have for anyone who might be a new and up-and-coming broker looking to get into the industry, or someone who might be new to their career wanting to advance their skill set or advance into more of a senior role? What would your advice be to someone at that level?
I would say one, network. Get yourself out there as much as you can, whether it be sort of industry or underwriter, events and things like that. Get to know people. The other part I definitely would say would be important is, give more than you take. So what I mean by that is, put in the extra hours, do all those extra things, right? So, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. So, if you think that, turning up at 9 and leaving at 5 and demanding from work from home and demand is going to progress your career, it's not, right? The things that are going to progress your career is show that you've got a good attitude, you've got a good work ethic, show that you want to learn and that you want to grow. Also, in showing that you want to go grow, I should say, asking for promotion, right?
Sure.
You know, that's crucial. You need to let your superiors know that you want more, you know,
Yes.
but also then prove that you deserve it.
Sure. How would you go about asking that question or positioning it to your employer?
Now, I think you need to make sure that they're sitting down with you and having regular chats with you, you know, whether it be every 3 months or 6 months about your career. You know, it doesn't have to be, you know, say you're an underwriter and, you know, you want to be a senior underwriter or an underwriting manager one day. It doesn't mean just tapping them on the shoulder when they're busy and say, hey, I want to be an underwriting manager, when that's going to happen. You know, you need to say, you know, hey, I'd love to catch up for a coffee, just have a bit of a chat about, you know, my career development, and, you know, and bring that into the conversation. Say, you know, this is what I'm loving about working here. This is what I'd like to be doing in future. Here are some ideas about how perhaps I could get there, you know, whatever, you know, education pieces, whatever it might be, you know, that you need to do to get to that point. You know, bring it into conversation and bring it in regularly, and then hold them to account as well. You know, if they say, yeah, we'll do it, you know, you need to make a whether it's a physical or a mental note to follow up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Always tying it back to what that brightness of the future looks like. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, mate. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on and share some words of wisdom with the community. Much appreciated.
No worries. Good chat with you.
You as well. Looking forward to see how Centric takes off over the next 12 months, 24 months. Very exciting time for you, and definitely appreciate you jumping on. Thanks, Brendon.
Thanks, mate. All right. Have a good day. See ya. Bye.